What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another War Within video. Hope you're all doing very well. I'm going to respond to Elmir's video where he talked about the new build for Holy Pally, which he's calling the Relentless Wrath build. We're going to talk about my experience with the build so far, comparing it to the build that we used to play, which ran Beacon of Virtue. That's the biggest change, is that you're not running Beacon of Virtue anymore. You're running Beacon of Faith. It's a very interesting idea. I'm going to talk about the build, and I'm going to show you a little bit of Elmir's stuff that we can comment, a little bit of the footage, and then I'll show you my experience in some Twitch VODs there. Just some TLDR on this video. I think the Beacon of Faith build generally feels better than the old Virtue build. I really don't like having to take Tears Deliverance and the haste buff, and I'll talk about that in a second. Some dungeons, I think, are probably better to have Beacon of Virtue versus Beacon of Faith, but lots of dungeons are better to have Beacon of Faith. I'm going to discuss that as well. Mechagon is a great example. Yo, I really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe on the video. I gotta get some coffee. Bye. I think Beacon of Faith is really big for helping tanks and, of course, vulnerable allies. That healing, especially for tanks, I would say that's a big change, where you can have consistent tank healing if they need it when they're pulling large trash packs around. Beacon of Virtue, mana cost and the global, every time you have to use it, you spend one global. That is kind of really annoying. And then I've kind of tweaked Elmir's build a bit. I'm going to show you that too. Let me talk first about the difference between Beacon of Virtue and Beacon of Faith from Elmir's point of view. This is his video here. I want you to listen to what he says about the difference between Beacon of Virtue and Beacon of Faith.
That you'll actually feel the loss of Virtue. When I say Virtue is more of a placebo effect and didn't really do much AoE healing, I really mean it. It's something that I ended up pouring over logs a significant amount. It was like 2 a.m. on Monday night, and I was just like, there has to be a way that I can drop Virtue, because it feels so bad pressing the global constantly. It consumes so many globals throughout a dungeon.
It does consume a lot of globals.
And on top of that, it's a huge mana sink, and it's awkward because of the 30-yard issue.
I'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, that's the latter half I wanted to show you, and then we're gonna go back here. I'm gonna listen to this.
Damage events, but
here's the difference.
On top of that, it's just gonna stabilize our healing a lot. Before with Virtue, we had a lot of like big burst windows, and now we just have constant healing. So Faith definitely is better for all damage profiles except for like one niche profile where it's like damage only comes out once every 15 seconds,
which is where Virtue is good.
Which happens in the trash in Rookery a decent amount. In the first area, those birds, the thunderstorm birds, that, and then the charged shots in Motherload from the Azurite launcher dudes at the very end of the dungeon. Those two spots aren't a big deal. You still have your two, as long as you. So I'm gonna cut him off for a second there.
So he mentions Motherload, right, as an example, and he's basically saying that like Beacon of Virtue is not needed because the damage profile in most of the dungeons isn't like good for Virtue. It's not coming out every 15 seconds. There isn't a lot of like pulsing AoE damage every 15 seconds is basically his point there. And I would say that I just think that particular point I would argue against, because I think that there's a lot more pulsing AoE damage that actually happens in a lot of the dungeons, right? So he mentions Motherload, but he only mentions the guys at the very end. He's talking about these two guys. The Venture Co. War Machines, every one of these War Machines has an AoE, a pulse of damage that they're doing, and it is very dangerous, the two guys at the end, and that's where Virtue could be better, because you can cover that damage event. That's kind of the idea there. But there's a lot more pulsing AoE damage in, not just in this dungeon, but in other dungeons too, right? In the opening packs, the mechanized peacekeepers, once they do their charge shield, they start doing pulsing AoE damage to the entire group. Once you're done killing the first boss, you have the Azurite extractors. They do rapid extraction. That puts the brown circles on the ground and does a bunch of pulsing AoE damage. The Azurok boss fight, when he enrages one of the Earth Ragers, they do pulsing AoE damage. So not only is it these last two guys at the end, but there's a bunch of other examples there as well. He talked about Rookery as well. He mentioned the birds in the first section, right before you kill the first boss fight. Those guys are definitely dangerous. Those the storm rooks do pulsing AoE damage for sure, but I would argue these even more damage as well. When you start traveling downstairs, you get to these guys, the void diffusers. They do the attracting shadows debuff. That does pulsing AoE damage. There's 2 of them at the very end of this whole corridor before you fight the next boss, and you have to kill both of them together. They do double pulsing AoE damage. That's where Virtue, I think, can gain some value as well. I would argue Workshop, Mechagon Workshop, has so much of this as well. If we just look after the first boss in the Cujo zone, there are these waste processing units. They do Mega Drill. That's pulsing AoE damage as well. Once we get past Cujo and start heading towards the Machinist's garden, there is a bunch of mobs here. The Blasteron guy, he's like that mini boss you fight. He does constant AoE damage. He's like a spider tank. You fight the 2 spider tanks later. They do pulsing AoE damage as well together. Back with the first spider tank guy, the defense bots, the defense box guys, they do short out, right? The short out, they start slamming the ground. They do pulsing AoE damage. At the end of the dungeon, you get more of these defense bots doing more pulsing AoE damage. So there's more examples that I could give, but I think that Ellesmere kind of underrepresents how much pulsing AoE damage exists in the Mythic Plus dungeon pool, where Virtue could gain some value. Where you know the damage event is coming, you pop Virtue, and then you start doing all your cooldowns, and you're going to do a lot of healing to counteract that. Now, his argument here, I think, is that you don't need it for most of the damaging events that are happening in the Mythic Plus dungeon pool. And I think he's probably right about that at the higher level with his sort of experience. I think if you're doing keys at the lower level, let's say the +10 level, and you're just pugging all the time, which is the vast majority of the experience for players in this game is that they're pugging Mythic Plus, I think Virtue offers you some really, really good comfort and assurance that you're going to be able to get through these damage events and keep everybody alive. If you're running Beacon of Faith, there are other allies that are going to be vulnerable. The ones that don't have Beacon of Faith on them are going to be a little bit more vulnerable in those really difficult AoE damage pulse events. So that's the only caveat I want to make. I gotta say, like, obviously I respect the hell out of Ellesmere. I'm not saying that he's wrong about his entire take. I just think this particular point, I would argue there's a lot more pulsing AoE damage in the Mythic Plus dungeon pool than he kind of represents with his video there. That's all I want to say. But the rest of what he says is really good. I will link his video down below, and we're going to keep going with this. Let me get to the footage of my dungeons, the runs that I did with Beacon of Faith and Beacon of Virtue. I'm going to show you both of them really quickly here. It's over here, actually. Sorry, wrong one. So we're going to do the Beacon of Faith one first. This is a +12 Priory that I did. We're going to go to 42. Back here. I'm just going to show you a couple sections of this key. So, like, putting up... Sorry, this starts... I'm going to show you my talents really quickly. So this is what I ended up running. This is the Relentless Wrath build. I run it with Veneration. That's the only caveat that I change. I really love Veneration. I think it's a great talent, and I can't get away from it. So I ended up dropping the Holy Shock cooldown reduction and healing. And I know that could be wrong. I understand it. I just can't get away from Veneration. So the rest of the build, I ran exactly as Ellesmere had. I did Relentless Inquisitor. I did Tears Deliverance. We're doing all the same stuff. We're doing Beacon of Faith, and we're going to see it in the dungeons here. Let's go to the first fight. Actually, is really good to show. I'll just go forward here. I thought we got to start it right away. The first pull is, of course, a very dangerous one, and one that you're going to blow Bloodlust for, and there's a lot of enemies in here. This is a great example of showcasing where this build actually works out quite well. And I do think, let me just say, the Beacon of Faith build offers a lot of stuff that the Beacon of Virtue build does not. Just Faith versus Virtue on its own. So Beacon of Faith obviously has no mana cost. Beacon of Virtue does. Beacon of Faith requires no globals to be used during combat, right? You can set up your Beacon of Faith, like your 2 beacons, before the fight even starts. And then you don't have to press any globals during the fight. You can also swap your beacons around from fight to fight, which is really, really cool. You can have a beacon on your tank when you're doing really difficult, like tons of mobs being pulled together. And then maybe for boss fights, you can put your Beacon of Faith back on a DPS that's going to be vulnerable to like pulsing AoE damage or whatever, right? You can move them around, and that is a really, really big deal, which is awesome. This is probably the cleanest I have ever done this poll, for sure. I just said that on the stream there, but it absolutely was the cleanest I had ever done it, and that was from just using Beacon of Faith right there, so very, very strong. Again, I think Beacon of Faith also is better probably for that the priority healing. It's worse in the pug environment potentially, and I alluded to this earlier, where Beacon of Virtue can really help to clean up some of the pug fights that are going to be super dangerous for you. Let me go to 57 here. We're going to start pulling these Sacred Toll guys. These guys are very, very dangerous. So again, Beacon of Faith, I think the mana cost being gone is great. The global, no global is really good. That's really, really good. You can Beacon of Faith the allies that are the most vulnerable. And then Eternal Flame from the hero tree, Herald of the Sun, it's actually 25% more effective when it's cast on you. This is something Elmir talked about. So if you hit yourself with a huge Eternal Flame and it's 25% stronger, that'll go into your beacons as well, which is very nice for Beacon of Faith in particular. It also works with Beacon of Virtue. There's no difference there, but it's just that with Beacon of Faith, you tend to put a beacon on other people besides yourself, and then you can focus on healing yourself, and you'll do more healing to those people that have the beacons on them. Okay, that's the kind of the combo there, which is really good. The last thing I'll talk about here is that I think there's less pressure when you're running Beacon of Faith. There's less pressure for you to get your beacon timings perfect, right? You don't have any beacon timing anymore. You don't have to press Virtue at the right time. You can just, you have your beacons running all the time. So there's no need to like perfectly time your Beacon of Virtue so that you're covering the damage event like perfectly. Do you know what I'm saying? There can be moments where you pop Beacon of Virtue too early, and then the damage event comes in a little bit later, and then you don't have any coverage on anybody at all. That is a huge issue sometimes. If you don't really know the dungeons perfectly, if you don't have them kind of memorized inside out, then you might mistime your beacon window, and you could really have a problem there. The other thing about Beacon of Virtue is that you can actually miss when you cast it. This is something Elmir talked about as well. Let's say you're running a key with 3 range DPS, and then it's you and the tank on the front lines. The separation of these two groups is pretty big, right? You might be separated by 20 or 30 yards from the range DPS versus the tank, depending on the dungeon. And that can result in you pressing Beacon of Virtue and it missing some of your allies because they're like out of range. So that is another... It doesn't happen that often, but it can absolutely happen. And when it does happen, it is very frustrating. Think about the last boss on Rookery. We're going to get to that, and I'll show you that in a minute, where Beacon of Virtue almost has no value whatsoever in that particular environment. That really sucks, for sure. We're getting to the end of the Sacred Toll section right here. This is, again, I just wanted to show you when the Sacred Tolls are going off. This is more kind of burst AoE damage that happens, where Beacon of Virtue would gain a lot of value. But what... You can actually cover it here even with Beacon of Faith, which is something that I wanted to showcase. So that is really good to see. This warrior is going to die because he was standing in the consecration. That's unfortunate timing there, but you can see Sacred Tolls are coming out and we're okay. I got my beacons up and we're getting people topped up. You can heal everybody else except for the beacon people, and you can still get those health bars back up to a healthy state, which is really cool. I'm not even using wings here, and I could have. So there is still... You still have the ability to do AoE healing without Beacon of Virtue, but I think it is a little bit less comfortable if you're using Beacon of Faith. Does that make sense? So if you're really comfortable on Holy Paladin already, if you're really comfy with it, you know what you're doing, you have a good handle on things, then Beacon of Faith is going to be better for you all the time. Always it will be better. But if you're not as comfortable, if you're a newer player, or if you're always pugging all the time, I think Virtue gains way more value in that particular situation. Let me move ahead here to the Brawn Pike fight. This mini boss up ahead, he's pretty brutal. Yeah, here he is here. So this is like constant AoE pulsing damage, right? It's going off all the time. This aura that Brawn Pike has, this is a great example. So this is, again, with Beacon of Faith. I do not have Virtue here, and you can see I'll pop Wings in a second, and everybody's absolutely fine. For the duration of Wings, Wings is so good at covering these damage events, which is why I really love it. We also have Tears Deliverance. Elmir talked about Tears Deliverance not even being worth pressing. He's totally correct about that. I tried pressing it on cooldown in this dungeon, in a couple of dungeons that I've done, just to see if I could get maximum value out of it, and it's horrible. Like, it's just so bad. You're better off just spending that one global, pressing Eternal Flame or Holy Shock. It'll be more healing for you. But you can see, even without Beacon of Virtue, our healing here is fine. It's actually fine. We're able to keep everybody up. You have so many other tools now Divine Toll's on like a 30-second cooldown. You get the insurance procs from Divine Toll and just the rest of the time. Your single target heals are so chunky, they're so big that they going into your Beacon of Faith, they actually do such a substantial amount of extra healing, right? 30% of like a 5 mil Holy Shock is a massive amount of healing going into those other two people, right? That's like 1.5 million healing, 1.2 to 1.5 million healing just for free going into those other targets. So it really does. It's really awesome there. Let me show you the final numbers on Beacon, the Beacon of Faith build. It is down here, 108.40. No, it's not. Let's get to the end here. I had the timing. Oh, it's 115.40. I was looking at the wrong thing there. Sorry, 115.40. Okay, here we go. So here are the numbers. That's my damage number. Here's our healing number. So Eternal Flame, Holy Shock, Dawnlight, Insurance. Your Beacon of Light healing is going to be much lower than if you're using Beacon of Virtue. Okay, if you're using Faith, at the end of the dungeon, your Beacon of Light healing will be lower. Now, it'll also overheal a decent amount as well. That's just because the beacons are permanent, right? That is important to understand. I also think you're going to get a little bit less value out of Save by the Light. Save by the Light is the extra shields that you get when people have beacons on them. If you're using Beacon of Virtue, you have shield, you have the beacon on everybody like a lot of the time, right? So it's up much more often, which means your chances of getting those Save by the Light shield procs is much higher as well. So that's very important there. But the numbers are good. I mean, our healing was good. It was absolutely fine. It felt comfortable to me because I've played Holy Paladin a lot now, and I think this is a build that you're going to want to use going forward. Again, if you're pugging all the time, if you're new to Holy Paladin, if either of those apply to you, Beacon of Virtue is still probably a good choice. Let's go to the Rookery. We'll go to 124. I'll show you the talents that I used here. 124.45. So those are the talents that I'm using right there. I have Power the Silver Hand with Glorious Dawn, and then we have Beacon of Virtue. So I've obviously dropped Here's Deliverance and the haste buff, and then we're going back to Beacon of Virtue. This is the build that I love to run. I've been running this a lot. I think Power the Silver Hand is a talent that is actually criminally slept on. This opening pack doesn't matter. There's not a lot of damage going out. We do a lot of damage, though, which is kind of nice. Good to see Holy Paladin pumping. It's this next pack you want to worry about. So the tank decides to, like, triple pull. He's triple pulling here, and I don't actually have wings. So, again, Elmir alluded to this. This is one of the packs where there's pulsing AoE damage going off. It's quite dangerous, and it's going to happen in a second here. This is where you want to time your Beacon of Virtue and have it up and ready to go. So, localized storms going off right now. I have Beacon of Virtue on everybody, and I can keep people alive. You can see it really does help to handle these kinds of events. These kinds of pulsing AoE damage events, that is where Virtue shines. Now, what Virtue is not doing for me is helping the tank, because this is a massive pull. I could have one beacon on the tank right now, and then he wouldn't be like yo-yoing so hard. Look at his health. He goes really low here, and he goes really low again, and I wish I had a Beacon of Faith on him right now that I could help him. This is exactly when you would want Beacon of Faith. This exact scenario where your tank is getting omega crushed by a massive pack of mobs. So yes, Beacon of Virtue has value here, and then here's an example of where it doesn't have value. I don't have Beacon of Virtue up right now because I used it, I think, to try and keep the tank alive. So I kind of mistimed it there. I'm going to get my Beacon of Virtue up now, and then you'll see all the health bars will go back up to full. But if you time Beacon of Virtue poorly, you're going to be in trouble. And in this particular situation, you don't have tank healing, which is, I think, really important. This is probably one of those things that matters much more the higher key level that you push. Like Elmir right now is doing plus 16s and like plus 18 keys or whatever. I think that the tank, at certain points in a dungeon, the tank having a beacon on them is going to be absolutely fundamental to them staying alive. And that's really important to remember there. So let's go to the next AoE packs, which are really dangerous here. These attracting shadows. So these mobs down here, the void diffusers, they do the attracting shadows. This is, again, pulsing AoE damage that's going to hurt your entire group, and there's other damage going off at the same time. So this is where Virtue, I think, can gain some value. You're going to get some good value out of Virtue here by having everybody topped up at the same time rather than just two people, because everybody's taking damage, right? Now, if we go to the final section here with the double attracting shadows, it gets even worse, right? Right after this pack is dead. So I have Virtue ready. I don't have Wings ready, which is a little bit scary, but we'll have Wings up later. We can just use Divine Toll and Holy Prism with our Beacon of Virtue, and it's going to be really good. So there's 2 attracting shadows going off right now. And we're able to cover it.
For the second set of this, so that's fine.
And then once again,
kind of spooky, though.
Our Virtue's coming back and our Wings is coming back, and we'll have it up for the second set, and everybody will be absolutely fine. So here comes the Arcing Void. I'm going to Virtue in a second here. Right now with Wings, and that's awesome. Now we've kind of covered this. So again, I just want to highlight that Virtue can make some of these pulls very comfortable.
Yep, we're fine.
And if you don't have
Absolutely
Virtue,
fine. That felt comfy. Like,
if you don't have Virtue, I think that it's just a little bit harder to navigate some of these kinds of pulls. That's all I'm really trying to say here. In defense of Virtue, again, I'll reiterate one more time. I think that the build Ellesmere is proposing is better. It is a better build overall. It's always going to be better for you, but there is just certain damage events that I'd be concerned about, that you want to be careful with. Now, this final pack here, look at this last boss fight. I ended up dying for some reason. This final boss fight is absolutely horrible for Beacon of Virtue, right? This is an example of where Beacon of Virtue almost gets no value whatsoever, but Beacon of Faith will, right? So right now I press Beacon of Virtue. I only hit 3 out of the 5 allies. So again, that's just straight up worse than Beacon of Faith already. Everybody is going to be super spread out, especially as the mechanics start rolling in. Everybody's going to be very spread out in this encounter, and it's just going to make Beacon of Virtue completely useless, in my opinion. It gets a tiny bit of value, but nowhere near as much. So there are fights like this where Virtue loses value, and there are other pulls in other dungeons where Virtue gains value. And I want you to see that both of those things exist at the same time. Okay? It's important to see that because I think in certain situations, it's going to be okay for you to still take Virtue. That's all I want to say there. I think we end up killing this boss, right? 50 seconds, 46 seconds, 35 seconds. Somebody dies, 17 seconds. With the mechanic, 14, 13. Then we end up killing him like with 6 seconds left, I think. Yeah, that's pretty close. We'll get to the overall here in a second. So there's our healing overall. You're gonna see Beacon of Light. This is again Beacon of Virtue is almost 11% of our healing. It was like 5.5% of our healing or 5% of our healing when we're using Beacon of Faith. So this is just obviously 2 dungeons. I've done a lot of testing on this. Let me tell you, this is consistently the way that it works. Your beacon healing will be higher with Beacon of Virtue, and it will overheal for less because you're using it when you need it, right? But again, you're missing that permanent, consistent healing that comes from having Beacon of Faith. So it's a trade-off there. It's a trade-off that you're making. So I just want to highlight that. I wanted to show you guys the difference between Virtue and Faith, the difference between the old school build and the new Wrath build that Ellesmere is proposing, which I think ultimately is a better build on the whole. It is. But if you're less experienced, or if you're doing lower keys and you're pugging all the time, I think running Virtue is absolutely fine. Now, I really hate these last 2 talents. I don't think you need them. In my opinion, I understand the value of Relentless Inquisitor, but taking a talent that is completely dead to get to Relentless Inquisitor in the bottom section of your tree, to me, feels really, it kind of feels terrible. So I'm going to keep trying this build on my stream, twitch.tv/ZucoVibes. I'm going to keep trying this build, and I'm going to try different versions of it. Right now, I'm doing a Beacon of Faith build with Power of the Silver Hand and Glorious Dawn and Veneration. This is my favorite setup so far, and I'm going to keep working it and just seeing how it kind of feels. And yeah, come tune into the stream if you want to watch me play it. If you want to see what happens, come check it out. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Again, my ultimate conclusion here is that this Beacon of Faith build in particular is better than Virtue, but there are situations where that is not necessarily true 100% of the time, and I just wanted to highlight some of those for you. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much again for watching. I love y'all. I'll see you in the next one.